Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Chris, and in today's video I have some wooden bases that we are going to turn into beautiful fall decor. So let's begin with DIY number one. I have got this square wooden plate. I probably picked this up off of Whatnot, and I knew I could do something with it eventually. Just didn't know what when I bought it. But as I'm looking at it, I have an idea. So let's first start by cleaning it with a little bit of degreaser cleaner and just make sure we get all the gunk off of it. I am going to first start out by grabbing some clear liquid patina. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and seal the wood in. I am not going to paint this. I want that wood to still be seen in all its beauty. So I'm going to go ahead and just put like I said, a liquid patina on this. You can use any kind of sealer that you have on hand. You could use that. If you have Mod Podge, use some Mod Podge. All right, once that is dry, I'm going to go ahead and drill a hole right in the top. And this was a little difficult to do. I'm not going to lie. I was like, okay, this is going to have to lay flat, and I'm going to have to go into it sideways instead of downward. It just was a little bit more stable for me. But once I got it started, once I got the hole started, I was able to go ahead and continue. Now, my first hole was too big. I, for some reason, always start with too small of a drill bit, but I guess it's better to be too small. You can make it larger. It's just more of a pain in the butt to make it smaller. And this is where I show you better of how I go in from the side. It's just so much easier that way. And then I had to make my hole a little larger. And I accidentally went through the front a little bit, but that's okay. It's going to be covered up anyway. So once it was all said and done, I ended up having to use the largest drill bit in my kit. And that ended up being just a hair too big, but that's okay. I've got this little wood finial that you can pick up at Hobby Lobby. And I am sorry, I forgot to adjust my camera back. It was just a little bit too long, so I did have to trim it down. I couldn't find my miter shears at first, so I thought I would try these 10 snips, and that didn't work. So here we go. Let's go ahead and snip that off. I tell you, sometimes I just try to find something close to me and see if it works, just to see, I got to test everything out. And once I get this finial trimmed down, I'm just going to go ahead, grab my wood glue, and I'm just going to squeeze that wood glue into the hole that we created here. And I'm pretty much just going to fill it up. And I'm going to go ahead and place the finial in there. And to hold that finial in place while that wood glue dries, I do end up putting some hot glue. Next, I am going to grab TDS transfers, and this is the floral transfers. These are such pretty florals, but I'm going to go ahead and just trim out this section of flowers right here. I love the curve in it. I think it's going to be so pretty on this plate right here in the bottom corner. I will have the link to TDS website in my description box if you want to go check it out. But Brandy has some beautiful transfers. And I'm just going to go ahead and peel that backing off and lay my transfer down where I want it. And then I am just going to burnish that in place. And the transfers do come with a little plastic, looks like a credit card, but it's plastic. That is supplied, but I like my little IOD rub-on sticks a little bit better, so I just grabbed that and just started rubbing it until the piece is completely transferred on. And then I just went ahead and cut me out another piece of floral. I didn't want that much empty space, so I'm going to attach this floral that I cut out, kind of make it look like it's growing out of the other flower. That's one thing about transfers. If you can find a way to piece it and make it look like it was made like that, then do that, because this looks so pretty when I'm done with it. Don't be afraid to try things, see if it works. And then once I get that there, this is what it looks like. And look, it just looks like it was made to go there. And then I felt like I still had a little bit too much space on this top right corner. So I'm going to go ahead and trim me out another piece. And I didn't use the whole piece. I just trimmed it off to where I thought was a nice little stopping point or starting point. So if parts of it will fit in one area and that's the part you want, hey, cut it. Don't be afraid. And after contemplating for a little bit how and where I wanted this to sit, I finally decided, and we're just going to burnish that on. Okay, so next I'm just going to grab some antiquing wax, and this is just from Waverly. I am almost finished with this stuff. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to some, just to thin it out just a little bit more, because I'm going to stain my finial here, which is the peduncle of our pumpkin. As you can see, it's a pumpkin. I don't even think I mentioned that yet. But I'm just going to go ahead and stain this finial, and I just use a baby wipe to wipe away the excess. All right, and once that finial is dry, of course, I've got to cover up this little hole that I managed to make with the drill gun. So I'm going to use some Spanish moss. I'm just going to put it around the finial, making sure to cover up that little oopsie. I do use hot glue. I probably should have had my finger protectors on, but sometimes I am in a hurry to get my project finished and I just don't think about it until I burn myself. And once I get as much on there as I like, I'm just going to trim away any of the flyaways. Now, before you put your Spanish moss on, if you duplicate this project, make sure you go ahead and seal in your transfers with your clear coat before, because I completely forgot about sealing it until after I got my Spanish moss on there. And it, Spanish moss could be a little bit messy, so I had to make sure everything was cleaned away. But just do this before you put the Spanish moss on. All right, and after that sealer has dried, I am going to just grab me some chiffon ribbon and just make a little easy bow with it. Now, I just wanted a little bit of a peachy color to bring out the colors of those flowers. I think it looks good. You guys will have to let me know what you think about this color ribbon. But once I get this tied on, this project will be done and we will move on to DIY number 2. Got one of these large industrial style yarn spools or wood spools, and I'm going to grab me some nautical rope, and I'm going to first start by putting just a little stream of hot glue to get that rope started, and then I'm just going to wrap that rope from top to bottom. And once I get to the end, I'm just going to secure the end with a little bit more hot glue. And both ends of this nautical rope have got the different plies of that rope just kind of raveled. So I'm just going to apply some hot glue just so I don't have to worry about those pieces unraveling from the rope and making a mess, because I am going to more than likely put this up for sale on a whatnot show. But I will just do that and definitely use my finger protectors. All right, I've got one more of these sunflower tags that I picked up from Lisa by Design Studios, I believe is her name. She is a seller on Whatnot. She makes these tags, and I've got one left in the packet I bought from her. And then I've also got these brown colored safety pins I picked up from Amazon, and I am just going to secure that tag in place with that safety pin. Next, I'm just going to trim down some of the florals that I have gotten from Hobby Lobby. That's usually where I get all my florals from. I always buy them when they are on sale, but I'm just going to pick out some here and there, trim them down, and we're just going to turn this into a little fall planter. And I don't know about you, but for the fall, I just love that rust colors. I love the oranges and the yellows. And then once I'm done with this project will be done. And now it's time to move on to DIY number 3. Now I've got this a cutting board. I had also purchased this off of Whatnot, and I'm going to first start by sanding it down, making sure it's nice and smooth. Once I get that sanded down, I will wipe away all of the dust. And I'm going to grab my IOD pumpkin mold. I can't think of the name off of the top of my head, but I am going to put it in the description box. And I'm going to first apply some cornstarch into the molds of my choosing. I'm going to grab my clay, and right now I'm using the IOD clay. I usually use DOS, but I ran out and I decided I wanted to try this. After this clay has sat for a little while, it gets a little harder than when it is first opened. I guess most clays do that. But I will say the one thing that I like about this clay is when it comes to taking the casting out of the mold, it seems to release a lot better than the DOS, but it's also, I think, all in all, a little more expensive to get the IOD, so I probably will go back to the DOS, but it's going to take a lot of clay to fill up this larger pumpkin, so I just work that in the best that I can, adding clay, and I do find that sometimes I will have to dampen my fingers with some water just to kind of get that clay to smooth out a little bit. And then if you have to, you can definitely take like a scraper or a card and just kind of skim the excess off of the top. Now on this larger pumpkin, I am not going to cast the peduncle part. And this is just where I am dampening my fingers just so I can kind of move that clay around just a little bit easier. I am trying to fill in some of the lower spots. And then I'll just flip it over and I will release that casting from its mold, and that was so easy, and the details on this pumpkin are absolutely beautiful. Oh, and then I do go ahead and moisten my fingers, and I just kind of glide it around on the pumpkin. This is going to help it from not cracking, at least I have found. But once I get that done, I'll set that aside, and I'm going to go ahead and cast this other pumpkin. Now I'm just going to lay out my pumpkins the way that I'm going to want them to sit on my cutting board. I want the smaller one to be stacked on top of the larger one, and I thought I would go ahead and trim off the top of that larger pumpkin so my smaller pumpkin will sit even with it instead of overlapping it. Now if I did it over again, I would probably just go ahead and overlap it, but you do you. I just thought that it would adhere more permanently, so this is the route I went. But again, if I could do it over, I would just overlap it. And you can see I took quite a bit of that top, just kind of framing that top pumpkin so they'll just sit evenly. Next, I'm going to grab my Tight Bond Quick and Thick to adhere my pumpkins. I always tend to just squirt my glue on there and then just use my fingers to smooth it out. One day, I'm going to designate a brush for this. I would like to get me a silicone brush for this job only. I just haven't yet. So in the meantime, I use my fingers. And once I get that large one down, I'm going to do the same exact thing with the smaller pumpkin on the top. When you're patting down to get your castings adhered, make sure you do not press too hard because you don't want to distort your clay image. And I will let those sit for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I am going to grab the color Crinoline from DIY Paint, and I am going to paint this entire piece on the front side of the cutting board. I do not paint around the sides, nor do I paint the back, but I am going to paint over our castings and on the board. And you can see I do bounce back between a flat paintbrush and a chippy style brush. I preferred the chippy style brush on the board and the flat brush along the pumpkins. And I don't want a full coverage on the board. I want this to look rustic on that board, so that's what I'm doing. And once I get that paint on, I'm just going to take a wet baby wipe and I'm going to go along these sides, just wiping off all that excess paint. I will say that's one great thing about DIY paint in this clay base is it wipes off very easily with moisture. Now I am going to go ahead and grab some clear liquid patina, and I am going to go ahead and put a coat all over the front of this cutting board. and that way I can get all that paint sealed in. Now I'm going to grab Summer Crush from DIY Paint, and I am going to give these pumpkins just a little bit of fall coloring. I love this color for fall. It's absolutely beautiful shade of orange. And I'm going to use a chippy brush, and I'm just going to go along my pumpkin, just adding that color wherever I see fit. Wherever my eyes feel, that's where I need to add the orange. Like I said, I want this piece to look rustic, so it definitely doesn't need a full coverage of paint anywhere. I do have different sizes of chippy brushes, so I do tend to also use a smaller one to help me get into the smaller spaces in between those leaves. Once I get the pumpkin looking like I like it, I am going to go ahead and grab the color Aviary, my small chippy brush, and I'm going to go along the leaves. And of course, you do not have to do yours in this color if you do decide to replicate this project. This is just the colors I like. This is what makes me think of fall. And even though I'm going to sell it, I think there are a lot more people like me. So hopefully somebody will see it and will love it just as much as I do. But you paint yours any color you want. And there are going to be times when I use my fingertip to kind of smudge that paint, like make it not so harsh looking in certain areas, especially around the little curly cues. And then in some areas, I may see that I need to go and put a little bit more of the orange in. So that's what I'm going to do. Next, I'm going to grab layered chocolate, and that's what I'm going to use to paint on that trunk. And I just do a really messy brush again on that. I called it a trunk on that peduncle. Next, let's grab transfers from the Lost Garden. I bought this on this, I think it was the spring release, and I don't think I've used anything out of it, but there are some florals in here that remind me of sunflower. So that's what I'm going to cut out, is this one right here. And I decided that I don't want this leaf on the outer edge. So I'm just going to trim that off. Like I said, use your transfers the way you want to use them. And I am just going to lay this where I want it. And I'm just going to kind of go over the transfer and kind of make a little indentation by folding it over that board, just so I know where to trim up. Then we'll just go ahead and pull it off of its backing, place it down, and burnish it on. Once I get that burnished on, I'm thinking, you know what? It needs something. It's like it's missing something. And then I've got this little straggly leaf sitting over here to the side. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to add this up here just a little bit. I'm going to fill in a little bit of that negative space. To me, that's just more appealing. I'm going to grab Van Dyke Brown from Paint Couture, and this is a glaze. I'm just going to take a little paintbrush, and I'm just going to paint that glaze over my board in different sections. I want it to look a little bit more dingy. If you don't like that look, then leave this out. But I definitely want to get that where the pumpkin edges are to the board. I just really want it to look kind of dark there. In my opinion, it just gives it more definition, more of a rustic appearance, and helps kind of disguise where we have glued that down. I do use a baby wipe to kind of dab up some of that excess glaze. And then I'm just going to go all in, and I'm just going to paint it on. I'm going to daub it up. Now, I don't like mine to look extremely grungy. I like just a little bit. And because we put down that clear liquid patina prior to using this, it does make that process of wiping up the excess so much easier. Once that glaze is dried, I'm going to grab the Apothecary stamps, and I'm going to spell out the word fall. These stamps are perfect for smaller projects. I tell you what, they're getting used. These are so far my most used product I have bought from IOD. But since there's only one letter in the packet of each, I'm just going to spell out FAL. I'm going to use this little backing piece that I've got. It will adhere. That way when I lay it down, it's lined up just the way I want it. But I'm just going to use some black ink. I use the IOD, but you use whatever ink you have on hand. Once I get the FAL on there, I will just wipe up my stamps. I will reapply the ink to the L and stamp that down. And this is done. Next, I'm going to go ahead and grab Best Dang Wax by Dixie Belle. This is in the brown. I'm going to grab one of my little, I believe they're like stencil brushes, but they're soft. I don't know. I got mine from Amazon. It took forever before they stopped shedding. They finally have. But if you've got one of those little makeup sponge or makeup brushes, those things will work. Whatever you use to buff your paint in, use that. But I use this, and I'm just going to get on top of the pumpkins and the leaves, and I'm just going to grunge those up just a little bit. I do just use a towel. I wipe up any of the excess. Next, off camera, I just made me a little messy bow. These ribbons I had gotten, I believe, last year from Hobby Lobby, so hopefully they will still have those this year. But I am just going to adhere that ribbon that I created down onto the cutting board. I didn't want to show you how I made it because I did in my last video. So if you hadn't seen the last video, go and check that out. Once I get that adhered down with that hot glue, I'm going to grab one of my little sunflowers. I tell you, I think I've almost used about half this pack of sunflowers. These also came from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just going to hot glue that in place. This project will be complete, and let's move on to DIY number 4. All right, so I got this wood rolling pin. Also from Whatnot, no surprise there. Sometimes it's just easier for me to shop online, and Whatnot's got, you know, those thrifted type of items, and there are some people on there that get these really, really cheap, and they can sell them really, really cheap, just like you would buy in a thrift store. But this handle is a little jiggly. The little plastic piece came out from the inside of that rolling pin. So I'm just at first I tried hot glue. I don't know what I was thinking. That hot glue is not going to adhere that plastic piece down. So after it sat dried and I knocked it back apart, I went ahead and used some Starbond glue, and that seems to do the trick. But if all you've got is a super glue, go ahead and use that. I do suggest the gel though. All right, so I've got this decoupage paper. This is from Roycycled. I did get this also on Sammy's website at Unicorn Dust Designs. And I just want to figure out which section I want to wrap around the center of this rolling pin. And once I've marked it with my pencil on how much of this paper I'm going to need and what section I want, I will just go ahead and I'm going to cut that out. I'm then going to double check to make sure I've got enough of an overlap. I'm then going to figure out where I can trim this paper a little bit more. And when I say trim, I'm going to go ahead and use my water pen. I will just go along that seam. That way I can easily tear it because I don't want this to have a straight line. I want it to look a little rustic. Now, before I put my decoupage paper on, I'm going to go ahead and paint the handles, and I'm going to use Apothecary and a chippy brush. And I am just going to messily paint that color onto the handles. Again, I want it to look rustic, so I am not going for full coverage. Once I get both ends done, I use my heat gun to dry it down. I'm going to grab some clear wax, and I am just going to go over the handles to protect that paint so it doesn't scrape off. And once I've got those handles done, I'm going to move on to decoupaging this paper onto the center of this rolling pin. I am using clear liquid patina as my decoupage medium. You use whatever you have on hand to decoupage with. We're just going to work our way around in sections. I am using a fan brush that I got from the DIY Struggle. These fan brushes are amazing. Oh my gosh, I am so happy I bought them. They do come in a pack. They are a great price point. Again, that link will be in my description box. No, this video is not sponsored. I just truly do love this product. And even if it was sponsored, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you just to be sponsored. I'm going to be honest, but you do you. And I do use some plastic cling wrap just to kind of help get those bubbles out of the paper as I am applying my decoupage medium. This is just going to help get those air bubbles out without tearing the paper. Now, once I get that paper on, I went over the paper in its entirety with some more of that medium. And after you do that, make sure it's completely dry, because the next step, I didn't have mine completely dry because I was trying to finish up this project because I'm always in a hurry. But what I love about these brushes is it fits under that paper. So if a piece did not stick down, I can kind of put that brush and it'll reach under the edges of the paper and just help me get it adhered better. I love these brushes. So I'm going to grab just a little file and I'm going to go around the edges and I'm going to get any of that excess paper off. And this is where you want to make sure that paper is completely dry, because mine was not, and you can see it tore right there. Oops. That's okay. I can fix it. So I proceed to completely dry it down with my air gun. Next, I'm going to go ahead and grab the color Raw Sienna. This is a folk art matte paint. And where I tore that paper, I am just going to paint in there. It is really a close match to the rust color on this paper. And then I also go around the edges with that same paint, just wanting it to look like it's got rusty on it. I'll use my finger to kind of blend that in. I am also going to add some of that paint along the top of the ends of the handle. Now I've got this pick from, that's not even a pick, it's, I don't even know what it's called. Just this little ornament, fall ornament from the Dollar Tree. It's one of those ones you can hang off like the door handles. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this apart. At first I was thinking I was going to use the acorn bells or maybe the pine cones, but I did not end up using any of that. What I ended up using is this piece right here that I tore off of the circular handle. And I just thought, you know what, this looks good by itself. So I'm just going to position the wire around the handle. Once I get it wrapped around, I will apply some hot glue in sections just to make sure it's tacked down. Once it's done, I thought it just needs something a little extra. So I'm going to grab one of these tags that I had gotten on Whatnot, and I don't want the one side that's already done, so I'm going to use the back side of this tag. And I'm going to go ahead and use my Tim Holtz, this is a vintage photo, and I'm just going to rust up that tag, antique it up a little bit and make it look old and grungy and just war. I like to use my paintbrush just to kind of blend that in so it doesn't look so harsh. Once I get that tag looking the way that I want it, I ordered some small stamps off of Amazon. I will put the link to the ones that I'm using in my description box, and if you're interested, if not, no worries. But it's got this pumpkin stamp in it, and that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to go ahead and put it on one of these acrylic backings, I believe is what it's called. And I had just purchased those from Amazon as well. I'll link those just in case. I'm going to use my ink, stamp it up, figure out where I want this pumpkin, and I'm just going to stamp that in place. And look at that. I think that looks good. I am going to make some more of these tags, and I'm going to put them in my Whatnot shop. Just saying. And I'm going to grab another one of these little paper sunflowers, and I'm just going to glue that over the little hole there on the tag. Use some hot glue and adhere that. Apply some more hot glue to the back of the tag, which used to be the front of the tag, and I'm just going to tuck it on up in there, and then this project will be done. Now this one I am unsure of. You guys will have to let me know, what do you think about this rolling pin? I'm not sure, but also let me know which of these was your favorite. I always love to hear that. But here we go. Here's the finale, and I think for the most part these all turned out wonderful. I'm going to end up selling all these pieces in a Whatnot show. I do have my Whatnot channel in the description box in case you want to go on over there and bookmark some of these shows. Come and check it out, or just come on over and say hi. But anyway, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.